Well, good afternoon, everyone. So just as a brief introduction, the Anguilla National Trust, we're a statutory body. So we were established by the government of Anguilla back in 1988. And we have four main program areas, and that includes species and habitat conservation, protected areas management, cultural heritage protection and promotion, and public awareness and outreach. And so we have a relatively far-ranging mandate, but a lot of that work does really focus on those four areas. So earlier this year, we received a grant from the UK government's Biodiversity Challenge Funds, Darwin Plus Local Initiative. And the focus was on enhancing our effectiveness and our efficiency of how we conduct our work and how we collect and manage and share data. And it focuses on a range of tools, including drones. And so we were incredibly happy to partner with Kim on this aspect of work. And in October, just before Hurricane Tammy hit, Kim spent a week with us, training us in how we can use drones to support our conservation mandate. And we were hoping that she would have been able to do this presentation on her work and what we did during our week-long training workshop. But unfortunately, Tammy hit and we have had to postpone, but we're so happy that Kim has agreed to do this by Zoom. And this also opens up an opportunity to share it wider within the region and elsewhere. So I know, Kim, you will probably do a proper introduction of yourself, but just really quickly, Kim, if you don't know her, is a marine biologist or a marine ecologist, and she splits her time between California and Barbados. And she was one of the first, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the first 500 people in the US to actually get a license to operate drones, and has since trained hundreds, if not thousands, of people and agencies across the US and the Caribbean in how to effectively use this technology. So we feel very privileged to have met Kim and to have benefited from her incredible knowledge and expertise. And so with that, I will pass it on to you, Kim. Thanks, and thank you everyone for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, great. Here, I'll sneak my face on there so that people can see me. Hi, everyone. Again, thanks, Farah. It was great. I spent a week working in Anguilla with the team there, and I had actually trained one member of Anguilla National Trust the year before who was not there, but I'm glad he's also on the team. So with that being said, I'm going to just briefly today review for everybody the ways that I'm working with specifically nonprofit agencies in the Caribbean to use environmental mapping and monitoring in their everyday workflows. So how this technology can be incorporated to effectively and efficiently improve environmental management in the region, but also can be applied anywhere in the world. All right, so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kim Baldwin, and I am a marine ecologist by trade, even though most people know me as the drone girl now. I was born and raised here in San Diego, California, where I'm actually at the moment. I'm leaving to go back to the Caribbean on Friday. But I did my first degree in marine biology here in California. And then from there, I moved to the Turks and Caicos Islands. And I fell in love with the Caribbean. I was working out there on South Caicos for the School for Field Studies, and I was a research assistant, and I was diving, and I was doing a lot of research. I'm a fisheries biologist by trade, so with conch and lobster fisheries in the TCI. And from there, I got a scholarship to go to Barbados and pursue a master's degree at CERMES, the Center for Environmental Management or Center for Resource Management and Environmental Studies, where I spent more than 22 years. As a student, I did my master's, my PhD there. I got a teaching credential there. I also lectured GIS courses there for, I think close to 15 years. And that being said, on top of that, I am a practical field practitioner. I work doing a variety of environmental mapping and monitoring surveys for reef ecosystems, mangroves, seagrasses, and I use GIS and spatial analysis tools to analyze and use that information for informed decision-making. But where my heart lies and where my passion is applying a participatory approach, working with local communities, nonprofits, government agencies, and the public to gather the information that they know about the ecosystem and incorporate that into decision making. So by merging conventional science with social, economic, and local knowledge, we get a lot better understanding of our world, as well as how to develop actual effective management solutions. So that's just a little background about me and who I am. I worked for many years, my PhD from 2006 to 2000, I think it was about 12, and then for 2 years after was the development of a transboundary marine resource information system. So that's a big mouthful, right? It was a marine geodatabase that we collected all types of information. We collected lots of maps and spatial information about where the reefs are, where the habitats were, and the resources, but also the livelihoods. This was partnered with a local NGO called the Sustainable Grenadines Project, and their goal is the conservation of biodiversity and livelihoods across the transboundary Grenada Bank. So this project area is actually 2 countries and more than 50 islands. That's why it took us 6 years to go out and map all this different types of information that you can see listed on the left. And then on top of that, about 60 to 70% of this database was actually based off local knowledge. It was based off the resource users like the dive shops and the fishermen and the ferries and the conservations area agencies, day-to-day knowledge, the knowledge that they had collected. So this was a really great process. This really showed how when we all cooperate and work together and multi-knowledge information, how powerful it is in terms of, again, developing management solutions that are relatable and effective to society. So I realized the more I worked out there, we were going out there. I worked on a lot of projects collecting these types of data for marine spatial planning and different management initiatives. And what I realized the more I worked is that really I needed to focus a lot more. We were collecting great data, but people didn't know how to use it properly. They didn't know how to use the tech to analyze the data or to share the data or to create a map to show the impact of a proposed development. So it was great that we were creating it, but at the end of the day, I would always have to help them and push this process along a bit. And that really is not, to me, where my heart was going with this whole thing. So I realized that more focus in the Caribbean, and this is where maybe about 10 years ago, I shifted my focus from being the data collector to working to strengthen people's capacity to use information, to collaborate together so that we have a better understanding of ecological health and social well-being. So as I mentioned, I changed my company and I really started training people at that point in GIS, which is a spatial analysis mapping software. But for those of you that know GIS, it's really not easy. The learning curve is very steep. And the reality is all of us are environmental managers. We've got other work to do. We're not just computer analysts. So it was great. We were building capacity, but the traction was a little slow. And so at that point, drones hit the scene, right? And this was about 2015 at this point, commercial drones. And this just seemed like a game changer to me. They were allowing us to get, like much higher quality information, much faster, more accurate, and super easy to use web-based tools. It seemed way too good to be true, right? But at that point, I went out there. As Farah mentioned, I was one of the first like 750 women in America. I wouldn't say people in America, but the first year the commercial licensing opened up, I went out there and got my commercial license. I learned to fly, and I started doing extensive testing and research on all the drones that were out there, all the different software and analysis tools that could be integrated to try to find a solution that could work in the Caribbean. Because I was trained by scientists from the United States who have a different set of resources and capacities, let's say, in terms of using text and even existing data that I did not have. We didn't have the cell coverage. We didn't have all the fast, processors and data storage. So the solution was out there in 2015, but it just didn't quite work. So like I said, I've spent the last 7 years extent, I think I almost did a PhD in this. I've done so much research on all of these things, and I've come up with a drone methodology, applying a participatory approach, an ecosystem approach to help environmental managers more effectively go out there and use this technology quickly, but also accurately. So I now go and, like, again, this is why most people know me as the drone girl, is that I'm out there training all types of people across the Caribbean, multi-levels of stakeholders, from nonprofits to fishing co-ops to government agencies, setting up commercial operational units for the government. And it's really been exciting, rewarding. Drones are sexy. Everybody loves them. They have lots of fun. I got to move my head. There you go, Devin. This is my initial drone training team from Anguilla the year before. So how are drones being used in the Caribbean? How am I using them with environmental managers? Probably the biggest way that we are using drones is for ecosystem mapping and biodiversity monitoring. There's a whole variety of ways that they are being used to map habitats, infrastructure, the resources, looking at changes over time. You also are able to identify issues and merge this with the conventional science. And so really understanding, creating 3D models, digital twins of historical sites, cultural sites, and also using these drones for surveillance and evidence collection without the officer or the person even having to get in close contact. And really, that's one of these benefits of the drones. The birds, we can get, people always ask me about birds. I got a couple great bird stories, but you're actually able to get relatively close to them. You don't have to climb a tree anymore. We were finding in Antigua, I was training EAG there, we were testing the height above certain species. So again, it's species specific, right? Birders know these things. So you've got to do your own research. Maybe you're using it for sharks or rays. There's a little research and development that you need to figure out, but you merge your own scientific methodology and what you're doing conventionally, and then just see, and this is where I help people, how these tools can be re-leveraged to improve your workflows. So that's probably the main I'd say overarching applications are those, but also hugely important is disaster risk management. And in the pandemic, food security was a big focus. I actually am a marine biologist, and I spent 2.5, 3 years focusing on food. Governments around the region realized we need to produce more food. We need to be more sustainable and resilient to disasters, whether they're pandemics or environmental disasters such as hurricanes and floods. We are realizing that we need to have base maps. We need to be able to quickly quantify damage. We need to be able to real-time share this. And then we need to have data and information to get help, to get insurance, to maybe get access to certain climate change funds. So that leads me on to climate change. I've been doing a lot of work in the last couple of years. I have a great publication if anybody's interested about this, in looking at it for identifying coastal communities' vulnerability, the impacts on poverty as well, and looking at the traditional things like flood mapping and modeling exposure, things like that. And then last but not least, I guess I already hit this one, but really understanding socioeconomics, understanding, merging it with local knowledge, using this data and merging it with people's day-to-day knowledge to get more informed understanding of problems and issues within the community so that we can allocate our resources in the most effective way as nonprofits or government agencies. So as I mentioned, in the Caribbean, working with drones is not the easiest place to work. We have a whole set of complexities and challenges that are probably, I work a lot with drone companies and drone software companies, so the hardware and software, and they love having my teams and me be beta testers. Why? Because we have the most challenges. We have limited money, resources, and we have limited data. We have limited computers. We're using older phones. We don't have Wi-Fi and cell data everywhere. The technical computers, like I said, we don't have the centralized storage and computers. And then we've got the winds, we've got humidity, we've got the heat. Our iPads are crashing when we're out there. So if it works across the scales and levels that I'm working with in the region, this is a very feasible solution. And so, like, again, the last, and I think what probably one of the most challenging is regional coordination and management, whether it's within the region of your country or the region of the Caribbean or the world. We've got multiple stakeholders within a country, and we have multiple ecosystems within a country. So this is really hard approach. But drone technology, why I'm just in love with this is that this has, like, as I mentioned, GIS is really hard to use for most people. This is a technology that you don't have to know GIS, and it allows you to plan, fly, process the data, create the maps, but then the most exciting part, analyze the information, conduct measurements, and integrate it, like I said, with all the other multiple knowledge data sets and sources that you have. It's extremely accurate. I spent over 6 years ground truthing this information. So these tools, the accuracy, the resolution, I would go in the field with my measuring sticks and our buckets, and we'd test certain things with our GPSs and measure things to make sure that this drone software was accurate. It's extremely accurate. Because it's commercial, it's made for construction, agriculture, utility companies that are scaled across the world. It's extremely non-technical. Everything is stored and processed in the cloud and can be shared and accessed really easily in a variety of ways, whether you're sharing, as I'm going to show you all the products coming up, reports or pictures or videos or maps and data. Okay, so the point of the talk, how can this drone technology support conservation in Anguilla? First of all, I just have to say, because I just love this picture, is one of my favorite things about Anguilla is all the beautiful salt ponds. I believe there's 13 or 14 of them in the country. If anybody has not been to Anguilla, it definitely is a unique feature, one of my favorite parts of the country. Sorry, had to put in a plug for those. So, like I mentioned, I go through this workflow with my teams when I train, where we don't just go out there and we fly and we're just going to map. We start with a workflow where you clearly identify, in order to be effective, there's lots of data you can collect out there with these drones, and you can collect it at really high accuracy and resolutions. But again, there's a cost to that. It takes time. It costs more money. It's harder to process. You need to have more skills. And so what I've realized is that people need to understand or start with the end first. You need to clearly know who's your audience, what applications are you going to use the drones for, and what scale, what types of data do you need? And so I walk all of my teams through this training, through this sort of needs assessment process where they can really clearly identify what are their goals. And that's what I'm going to just show you this process over the rest of the presentation, is what we did and how we did this in Anguilla. So we really sat down and we did a needs assessment, and then we trained, and we've slowly started to develop some of the workflows that they are going to need moving forward. So first, step one, we clearly identified our application. So when I talked to Anguilla National Trust, and this is even before I got there, so I like to really clearly know what their applications were. And they had told me they really wanted to look at birds and sea turtle conservation, invasive species, revegetation efforts, biodiversity monitoring of turtles, of birds, of sharks, conservation management, disaster risk identification, and vulnerability was another project focus for the Anguilla National Trust. And so they really wanted this focus of how they could merge this drone data with these other databases, because as Farah had mentioned, the Darwin project, it's not just about drones. It's a whole data handling, management, and analysis workflow that they are in an endeavor. They're just launching right now. So really, we were trying to think about how we're going to merge all this, how all the pieces can fit together. And so really, they also wanted to look at the different impacts and mitigation measures, as I mentioned, development of management scenarios, being able to track their management efforts over time, getting areas, being able to produce contours for the land, and then aiding discussion. Public outreach and education is a big part of the A&T's goals. So how could they also use this information for social media, for sharing, for working with the public and other presentations? And then how can they get the communities and the stakeholders of Anguilla to engage with the drone photos and the drone data to participate with them in future efforts? So again, this was a two-pronged project. Their main applications were focusing on conservation and disaster risk management. So I actually took this picture right here the night before the storm hit. I was testing drones in high winds to see how they could handle. I'm sorry again. So 3 main mapping and monitoring sites were set up for them, or they determined were priority. So they said they wanted to look at Shoal Bay, and the applications at Shoal Bay were invasive species, the revegetation efforts, as well as bird monitoring, and there were some historical ruins within this site. Sherricks Bay, the focus there was bird monitoring. There's all kinds of salt ponds there, sea turtle nesting. There's also beach erosion and coastal development is happening in this area. And then last, but definitely not least, is probably our big case study, which is Sandy Ground. And so we chose this again for multiple reasons. It's a soon to be protected area, disaster risk prone. It's got a low-lying fishing community. It's heavy tourism area and also has local events. So it's important for the community. There's sailing and historical sites as well within this ecosystem. So at that point, we figured out, okay, this is the goals of where we're going to focus on. And then the drone mapping course. So over the course of the week, we learned how to set up the missions, how to plan them, understand the site and safety assessments, as well as how to fly. We did that the first couple of days. And then we went out and we conducted at these sites drone surveys. And again, we applied, I taught them commercial operating, which are professional standards for drones, for drone flying on a commercial level. And then we processed the data and we went over the tools of the web-basing analysis tools, the AI tools, and then how to produce reports and share this information. So the first case study, as I mentioned, this was Shoal Bay, and we were still learning how to fly. I think this was day 2 of training. We went out in the wild, as I like to say. We worked on a training field the first day, and then the second day we went out to Shoal Bay to do a little free flying. And you can see here, this is just one of the students took this video that you're seeing here at Fountain National Park. So this is just a small area. I think it's about 25 acres. You can see it's this green area. We're spinning around right here. And so the National Trust is managing and revegetating. I don't know if you can see when it spins around, there's a fence that goes around the property of this area. So there's a lot of information. Just taking a simple video like this, we're getting some great data and information, right? We could talk about, you can see that the area of the sites where the ruins are within here and other features. But where things start getting exciting, I think, is when we start doing the drone maps. So the team, this was our first day. This was our demo training day, learning how to fly. So we mapped a very small area. It was like I mentioned, but it was the boundaries of this management area. It took about 7 minutes, 64 photos, and there's the accuracy and resolution of the product. But the drone went up, it flies in a grid across those green lines and it snaps photos. And then you can see here's the photos that were taken. And then we upload those up into the cloud and it stitches these together and it takes out the distortion of the photos so that it's an accurate map that you can conduct true measurements on. And that's called an orthomosaic. And so here's the image, and it's a 3D because it has elevation to it too. So that's why it looks 3D here. And so you can see the boundary of the area there. I think you might can have a little laser. And then you can see here. So then you can turn on these different layers. This is the elevation model. So this is computerized and generated out of that. And you can already see the difference right there in the elevation, the way it slopes down that last part. And then there's another tool that we learned how to use called the plant health tool. And this really identifies plant health and variability. And you can see here those lines that go across the middle there, which is drainage, I believe, but maybe the National Trust can tell you about that. I know they had mentioned to me the meaning of that, and I forgot, sorry. Okay, so the next site that we went out to map here was Sherricks Bay, West End Pond. And you can see this is the product there from Sherricks Bay. The applications here, we're really looking at the mangrove restoration site, bird monitoring. We flew this and the previous mission using a DJI Air 2 drone. This is just an off-the-shelf drone that you could buy at the DJI store with a regular RGB camera. So we're not using fancy tech here. So 125 images were captured to produce this ortho mosaic. It's about 35 hectares. I think that's close to like 60, 75 acres. And so again, you're going to see this West End Pond is broken into multiple pieces. Why? Because I had the team break up the map. We could have flown it in different pieces because this is their first day. They planned and conducted this fully on their own. So you can see multiple different pieces of the ortho mosaic were flown. But then on this day, we also learned a different type of flight plan. We learned how to do something called a 360 panorama. And in a moment, I'll show you one of those live. But it goes up and it takes pictures in a 360 view. And we were experimenting, flying at different heights and using these for birds. And why are these exciting? Because you can zoom in and you could count birds in the trees, or you could zoom in and see, and these sorts of imagery is really useful for a community presentation. It's not as technical as a drone map, and you can have some great discussions based on panoramas. And then we moved on to sandy ground, as I mentioned. And so sandy ground, we played with some more drone mapping. I'll show you that map in a moment, but we also looked at other flight surveys that can be used. So as I mentioned, we did the panorama there over the low-lying community. We did something called video plans, where you're just capturing it's a video that flies the same path again and again. So you could do this over time, and it's going to take the video in the same way. Fixed point photos do a very similar thing. Okay, so the fixed point photos you can see over here, the drone flies and it takes, this here's taking 6 photos, but at the same height, the same angle, the same landscape perspective across the area. So this, again, I was with EAG in Antigua. They were using this over birding, nesting, roosting sites, so that you can get, and we can understand the variability over the year of, let's say, the migratory birds and the nesting. And then here we learned how to do something called the corridor plan, and I'll show you what that looks like right here. So this is a long flight plan where the drone goes up in a long way. So beaches, it's made for pipelines and train tracks. I love them for beaches. Okay, so you can do just the coastal ecosystem, looking at a lot of times the most interaction that's happening is right along that coastline. And then here it shows you the computerized elevation model of sandy ground, which, if any of you have been there, this is basically below sea level, this little coastal community. The buildings are not that high. And then you can see here, I'm just showing you the examples of different products you get. You can also automatically create contour lines and export those out into GIS or any Google Earth, there's a whole range of softwares. So it's really exciting. So sandy ground, we went out there. I think I should go back. I can leave it here. So we went out the first day and we flew and we did all those great maps. But when we were out there flying, we had a lot of problems, which I get really excited when we have a lot of problems, because our problems were intense. All right, we had high winds, a storm was coming in. It's in a low-lying basin that has little hills up on the side. You'll see it later when I show you the live demo, but the signals were getting crossed in there. We're also in a red zone, which means restricted zone. It's on the edge of the airport runway. So we had to get special permission. We had to unlock the drones. And then we had high winds. And then there's all this electromagnetic interference. This is like BVI. It's like Road Town. It's got all these towers and poles, and the signals are crazy, and the drone does wild things. So this was a great place to go. And so when we went the first day with the students, everything went wrong, which was great. We learned a lot. So we decided we were going to go back out there again, and we were going to try it again and see if we could figure out the problems and rectify them, which we did. And so we went out on the Friday. This is literally hours before the storm. People were offices were closed. No, we were out at Sandy Ground mapping. We wanted to get this base map done before this storm hit. We didn't know how it was going to be, but we knew flooding was probably highly probable, and it definitely happened. So here's the baseline map. So we flew this entire area here, which was 301 acres. And that was flown in under 40 minutes, you can see here, with the Mavic 3 multispectral drone. This is pretty much my new favorite drone. And you can see it was a gorgeous map. Let's see if I can go next. And here you go. So here, this just shows you all the pictures. 1,128 pictures were taken here. And so this is the day before. And then I'm just showing you, oh, this is something called the point cloud. And this is how it computerizes that. I don't know why my next is not working. All right. And then the storm hit. So the power went out probably for a good week in Anguilla. And we were just on cell. And the morning after, I heard from Trevor at Disaster Management that he sent me some WhatsApp pictures of a landslide. And so at that point in time, I got Saturday, we got to go back out. So I went down to disaster management and we decided we were going to go out the fire department and we were going to do some scoping, some preliminary impact assessment and see what was the extent of these damages, because we had these few WhatsApp shots that the community had sent in. And so what I did at that point was, you're in a disaster, you're in an emergency, we have no power. We have very limited cell phone data. So the drones had to be unlocked. Remember, we were in that red zone. So I had to go down to disaster management where the generators were, get everything unlocked. And then we had to go out there. We had limited batteries because of the power situation. So you have to be really effective with your drones at this point in time. So what did I do? I fired off something called a corridor plan, as you can see here, along the extent of the ridge where we knew there was damage. We also flew videos and took photos and went very far down the coast just to make sure, is it just this area or is the damage further in inaccessible areas that people don't know about? So we scoped it out and we realized from flying this mission, which took less than 3 minutes, okay, from end to end there, that's 600 meters of coastline that I was able to map and get a 3D model of in 3 minutes. All right, this is amazing, right? So we're able to go there and we're able, see if it's going to let me go out. I don't think it will. Oh, it will. All right, so here's the map. I think you guys can see there. So here I went out. This is where we flew. And we also flew and took some panoramas. So let me just click on one so you can see it. So this is just the drone image. I think you can see. Here, let me move this so you can see the center. Oh, I don't need to be in there. So this gives you some idea of, let's see. Sorry, everyone. For time, I'm just going to keep going. So we did that. And then at that point, like I said, we're getting our elevation contours. And the exciting thing is we're able to share that out. All right. We're able to share that immediately. All right. That map, once it was uploaded and processed, it only took less than about a half hour to process something that quick. Okay, and then we went down to the second site where we heard things were worse. And we saw the landslide that happened here. You can see the 3D model at Mariners. You can see here, this is actually where we flew from, which is just right here on the edge of the cliff. So I think you can see here, this is where the cliff's falling down. All right, you can see people are looking over it. And so this is obviously a high risk thing. And the storm wasn't over yet, right? There was still more rains and more winds happening at this point. So really we needed to understand what are the people doing and what's the impact of the landslide. And then we also had SEDEMA. We had a lot of regional agencies they were working with to determine, do they need assistance and provide data to. So this was great that we were able to go out there and collect this data and then share it across the region remotely in near real time, same day. They did have power down at disaster management. There were generators. So we were able to get in there and do that. Let me see if I can. And make this bigger. Is there any people are still there? I know I'm talking a lot. I was just going to put on the 3D model so you could see it. And so you can see here some annotations that were done on there. That is what I believe Trevor from disaster management did. He was just generally, I mean, I think we just did this in a frenzy the first day. He was just generally outlining the area so that we could understand. And again, he probably measured this using the 2D map. So we were very quickly able to understand how much of this cliff had. And so you could see this 3D model. There are really amazing. And again, you can just turn on the contour lines. We can export those contour lines. We can flag things and create issues as well. So I'm going to just keep going and we'll come back if anybody's interested. Sorry, I've got to figure this out. Oh, sorry. I'm having serious technical issues here. Okay. Okay. I think I finally figured this out. Are you guys on my screen again?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, so in conclusion here, there's a variety of measurements and integration tools. This is also, I think it's really exciting to explain that right now there are all these new tools coming out. I just came from a drone conference and AI is here. AI, there's tools, you can see some of them there, but they have automatic tree counting tools, automatic forestry identification to identify low-lying shrubland from forests, that the drone photos now, and then in the very near future, being the ability to train these photos yourself. So let's say you cared here in the blue, I did it for beach chairs. You draw a box around 5 beach chairs, and then it goes and it counts all the beach chairs. Same things for birds. So this is real. This isn't the future anymore, which makes me really excited. So there's a variety of different tools that you can get slope and area and GPS points off the map. But then also there's all these, as I mentioned, automated tools that they're putting on. So as I mentioned, plant health and the elevation, getting the contours, etc. So information access and sharing, as I mentioned, can be either exported as a variety of data products, shared, as I just showed you, as a web map, but also exported as a progress report. So this is a progress report that was just automatically created for that landslide project. And so I believe I can click there, but I'm not because I'm having too many technical difficulties. And it will open up the web map. So it's a PDF that opens to these electronic things, and then you can see I just added some context about the site and what we did and the problems. So these are really useful also as well. So the results, what did we actually accomplish in 1 week? In 1 week, we learned how to fly. And well, what did the National Trust have? They learned how to fly the drone that was procured for them, the Air 2S. They also got experience using the Mini 3 and the multispectral drone. There was 5 people that were trained how to use primarily drone deploy processing software. And I think some of the highlights we learned was the unlocking issues in the red airport restricted zone, which is always a challenge for students. We collected over 2,500 pictures. I don't even know how many videos at 3 sites. And we tested a variety of different flight plans, flight heights, using different payloads. So the multispectral and the applications versus the regular camera, terrestrial and marine applications. Oh my gosh, I could go on. So we flew, as I said, we mapped over 250 hectares in the week, 650 acres, and we produced different types of products. So I'm going to conclude this right now by recommendations, next steps. What have we achieved, but where should be the next steps for the National Trust? So it's really, they got drones and they got hardware procured for them, as well as software for 1 year. So really getting out there flying will be of extremely importance, but also the software is absolutely essential. The drone deploy is given to nonprofit agencies a 75% discount. So it's really relatively cheap, but planning for this long term, I find many of my agencies, they think 1 year at a time. So we need to start thinking about that long-term continuity, because the worst is you get this and you upload everything, then you lose your account, then you got to reload, upload everything. So that long-term needs to happen. Also, optimizing the skills they learned and just getting out there and flying it. So getting out and having, we were saying, like a Fly Friday, and really the National Trust is trained. They also have other members. I think there's a total of 15 people now in Anguilla that I've trained in the last 2 years, and knows everybody there. So teaming up, collaborating with the other government agencies, having like Fly Friday and going out and getting the skills will be extremely important. Also creating videos, video practice. It's really, as I like to say, stick time needs to happen. And then really looking into an advanced training, because I think one of the biggest things that A&T got interested in were the data analysis tools and the using the information. And in the 1 week intro boot camp, there's only so much we can cover. I have a 3-month class that really dives deep, but so that's where I focus a bit on that, as well as advanced understanding how AI tools and machine learning can be incorporated. All right, which again, advanced training, but it's not that advanced. These tools exist, but just which tools are out there and how to use them. And then if they're thinking long-term, really implementing a standard operating procedures, safety procedures, data protocols, and formalizing the concepts and guidelines I recommended and taught them. And as I mentioned, just moving forward, going out there, engaging communities, getting and using the drone data to actually map social, economic, and community information. And with that, I am going to stop. I definitely went way over, but it was just so exciting to actually finally, I think, because I wanted to present these like a month ago, to present it to you all. So National Trust and anyone else that has questions. Thanks.
Very good job, Kim. I love that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kim. That was amazing.